The sun was beginning to disappear behind the tall buildings of Lagos as Zainab hurried down the busy street. Her feet ached from standing all day at the restaurant where she worked as a waitress. She had been on her feet since 6 o'clock in the morning, serving customers, taking orders and cleaning tables. Now it was almost 9 o'clock at night and she was exhausted. The money she earned today was barely enough, but it was something. Every naira she made went towards her mother's hospital bills. Zainab pulled her thin jacket closer to her body as she walked towards the bus stop. Dark clouds had been gathering in the sky all afternoon, and now the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. She hoped to catch the last bus home before the rain became too heavy. Her mother was waiting for her at home, probably worried sick about where she was. Zainab had promised to be home by 9 o'clock, and it was already getting late. When she reached the bus stop, there were only a few people waiting. An old woman stood with 2 shopping bags, and a young boy was sitting on the bench playing with a stick. Zainab sat down on the bench and waited, watching the sky grow darker. The rain was falling harder now, creating small puddles on the ground. She checked her phone. It was already 8:55. The bus should arrive soon. It always came around this time. Minutes passed and the rain became heavier. Zainab could see the wind pushing the water in sheets across the street. The old woman hugged her bags and moved closer to the shelter of the bus stop roof. The young boy had gone home with his mother, who had suddenly appeared and taken him away from the rain. Now it was just Zainab and the old woman waiting under the small shelter. At 9:15, Zainab's heart sank. The bus had not come. She knew what this meant. The bus must have broken down somewhere on the route. This happened sometimes, and when it did, people were left stranded. The old woman muttered something under her breath and pulled out her phone to call someone. Zainab had no money for a taxi. The little money she had was for her mother's medicine. She could not spend it on transportation. Zainab stood up and began to pace back and forth under the shelter, watching the rain fall. She was cold and tired, and now she was worried about her mother. What would her mother think? Would she be angry? Would she be afraid that something bad had happened to Zainab? Her mother always worried about her, especially when she was out late at night in the city. The old woman's taxi arrived and she left in a hurry. Now Zainab was alone under the shelter. The rain continued to fall and the street grew quieter. Fewer cars passed by. Most people had already gone home to their families. Zainab pulled her jacket tighter and sat back down on the bench, trying to stay warm. Then through the rain she saw a figure approaching. At first it was just a shadow, but as it got closer she could see it was a man. He was tall and walked with a straight back, moving with confidence despite the heavy rain. His clothes were expensive, she could tell, even though they were wet from the rain. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. As he got closer to the bus stop, he noticed her sitting there alone. The man slowed his pace and looked at her. His eyes were kind, and there was something gentle about his expression. He walked into the shelter, shaking the rain from his shoulders. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then he spoke. "This rain is terrible," he said, his voice deep and calm. He had an educated way of speaking, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had gone to good schools. "Are you waiting for the bus?" Zainab nodded. "Yes, but I think it is broken down somewhere. It has not come for a long time." The man smiled. It was a sad smile, as if he understood her situation. He sat down on the other end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. His name was David, and although he did not tell her his job or how much money he had, there was something about him that made her feel safe. "My car broke down about a mile from here," David said, looking out at the rain. "I was walking to find a taxi when I saw you sitting here. You should not be out alone this late, especially not in this rain." They began to talk. Zainab found herself telling him about her mother, about her work at the restaurant, about how tired she was of struggling. She did not know why she was telling this stranger so much about her life. Usually she kept her problems to herself. But something about David made her feel like he truly wanted to listen. He asked questions, real questions, not the kind that people ask just to be polite. David told her a little about himself. He said he worked in business, that he had traveled a lot, and that he sometimes felt lonely even though he was surrounded by people. He talked about his childhood, about how his father had worked hard to build a good life for the family, and about how that had taught him the value of hard work. "I think you are very brave," David said, looking at her with sincere eyes. "Not many people would work as hard as you do for their family. That takes real strength." Zainab felt tears coming to her eyes, but she held them back. No one had ever told her she was brave before. People usually just saw her as the girl who served them food or cleaned their tables. They did not see her as a person with dreams and struggles. But David saw her. He really saw her. As the night wore on, the rain began to slow down. They continued talking, sharing stories and dreams. Zainab told him that she wanted to become a nurse someday, to help people and give her mother a better life. David listened and encouraged her, telling her that she had the strength to achieve her dreams. When it was almost 11 o'clock, David made a suggestion. The rain has slowed down, but you are still wet and cold. There is a restaurant not far from here that is still open. Let me buy you dinner. You can warm up and we can continue talking. Zainab hesitated. She had been taught to be careful about strangers. But something told her that David was different. She agreed, and they walked together through the wet streets of Lagos to a small, quiet restaurant that was still open late at night. As they walked, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt understood. She felt seen. And for the first time in months, she felt a small spark of hope. The restaurant was small but beautiful. It had soft yellow lights hanging from the ceiling, and the walls were painted a warm cream color. There were only a few other people inside, mostly couples sitting at tables in the corners, speaking in quiet voices. David led Zainab to a table near the window, where they could see the wet streets of Lagos outside. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle now, and the city lights reflected in the puddles on the ground. A waiter came over and asked what they would like to eat. Zainab looked at the menu and felt nervous. Everything looked expensive, and she worried about how much this meal would cost David. But he smiled at her gently and said, "Order whatever you want. Do not worry about the price." She ordered a simple chicken dish with rice, and David ordered fish with vegetables. When the waiter left, David ordered a bottle of water and some juice for them to drink. As they waited for their food, Zainab found herself talking more than she usually did. Maybe it was the warm light of the restaurant, or maybe it was something about David that made her feel comfortable. She started to tell him about her mother's illness. She explained how her mother had gotten very sick 3 years ago with a disease that required expensive medicine and regular visits to the hospital. The doctors said her mother would need to take medicine for the rest of her life. At first, I did not understand how serious it was, Zainab said, looking down at her hands. I thought she would get better quickly. But then the bills started coming. So many bills. The medicine costs a lot of money. The hospital visits cost a lot of money. And my father, he left us when I was small. So there was only my mother and me. David listened carefully to every word she said. He did not interrupt her or look at his phone. He just listened with his eyes and his heart. When she paused, he asked her questions. He wanted to know more about her mother, about what kind of person her mother was, about what her dreams had been before she got sick. My mother is the strongest person I know, Zainab said, and her voice became stronger as she spoke. Even though she is sick, she never complains. She always asks me about my day. She always wants to know if I am eating enough, if I am happy, if I am taking care of myself. She does not think about her own pain. She only thinks about me. The food arrived and they began to eat. The chicken was delicious and Zainab realized she was very hungry. As she ate, she continued to talk. She told David about her job at the restaurant, about how her feet hurt at the end of each day, but about how she never missed a shift because the money was important. She told him about the small room she shared with her mother in a crowded area of Lagos, about how sometimes there was no water, and about how she had to carry water from a well down the street. David told her about his own childhood. He said that his father had started with nothing, just a small business that he ran from a tiny shop. His father had worked every day, sometimes 14 hours a day, to build something better for his family. David said that his father's hard work had taught him that anything was possible if you worked hard enough and believed in yourself. But you know what? David said, looking at her seriously. My father also learned that money is not everything. The most important thing is the people you love and the relationships you build. He always told me that a person who has money but no one to share it with is the poorest person in the world. Hours passed as they talked and ate. Other customers came and went. The restaurant owner stopped by their table to ask if everything was good, and David thanked him and said it was wonderful. Zainab found herself laughing at David's stories. He told her about a time when he was young and his father had taken him on a trip to another city. They had gotten lost, and instead of being angry, his father had made it into an adventure. They had walked through streets they had never seen before, tried food they had never eaten, and met people they would never forget. That is what life is about, David said. It is not about having everything planned perfectly. It is about the surprises, the unexpected moments, the connections you make with people. When they finished eating, it was past midnight. The streets outside were quiet and empty. David paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the waiter. As they walked out of the restaurant, he turned to Zainab and said, "You must be very tired. It has been a long day for you and you still have to go home. I have an idea. There is a hotel very close from here. I have a suite there where I stay sometimes when I am in Lagos. Why don't you rest there for a few hours? You can sleep properly in a comfortable bed and then I can make sure you get home safely in the morning." Zainab hesitated. She knew this was not a normal thing to do. She had been taught to be careful, to not trust strangers. But she also knew that David was different. He had listened to her all night without expecting anything from her. He had treated her with respect and kindness. And the truth was she was exhausted. The thought of a comfortable bed was very appealing. "But you will not be able to rest if I am there," she said, worried about putting him out. "I can rest in another room," David said simply. "The suite has 2 bedrooms. You will have your own space and I will have mine. I just want to make sure you are safe and comfortable." They walked to the hotel, which was indeed very close. It was a nice hotel with a beautiful lobby and friendly staff. David led her to his suite on the 10th floor. When they entered, Zainab's eyes grew wide. She had never seen a place so beautiful. The suite was large and clean, with modern furniture and a view of the Lagos skyline. There was a bedroom with a big bed, a living room with a comfortable sofa, and a bathroom with a shower. "This is too much," Zainab said, feeling overwhelmed. "I cannot stay here." "You can and you will," David said gently. "Go shower if you want. There are clean towels in the bathroom. And there are extra clothes in the bedroom drawer. They might not fit perfectly, but they are clean. After you rest, we can talk more if you want, or you can just sleep." Zainab took a shower and put on the clean clothes David had left for her. When she came out, David was sitting in the living room reading a book. He had changed his clothes too and looked more relaxed now. They sat together on the sofa, and as the hours passed, they talked about everything. They talked about their fears, their dreams, their hopes for the future. They talked about books they had read, places they wanted to visit, and what made them happy. As the sun began to rise outside the window, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Zainab realized something. She had made a real connection with someone. Not a connection based on money or status, but a real human connection. David had listened to her, had cared about her, and had made her feel like she mattered. As she looked at him sitting beside her in the early morning light, she felt her heart skip a beat. She was falling for this kind stranger, and she did not even know his last name. The sun was just beginning to rise over Lagos, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Zainab had fallen asleep on the sofa sometime around 5 o'clock in the morning, her head resting against David's shoulder. He had stayed awake, not wanting to move and disturb her peaceful sleep. He watched her face in the early morning light, seeing how the worry lines on her forehead seemed to disappear when she was sleeping. She looked younger, more peaceful, like a different person from the tired girl he had met at the bus stop just hours before. At 6 o'clock, David's phone began to ring. He carefully moved away from Zainab so as not to wake her, and he walked to the other side of the room to answer the call. His voice was low and quiet at first, but as the conversation continued, Zainab could hear it becoming more serious and tense. She woke up slowly, confused at first about where she was. Then she remembered. She was in David's hotel suite, and they had talked all night long. Zainab watched as David paced back and forth, speaking rapidly into his phone. She could not hear all the words, but she understood that something was wrong. Something had happened that required David's immediate attention. He was saying words like urgent, and emergency, and I need to leave right now. His face looked worried and stressed in a way it had not looked the night before. Finally, David ended the call. He stood there for a moment, just holding his phone, looking very tired and very frustrated. Then he turned to Zainab, and she saw the concern in his eyes. "I am so sorry," he said, walking back to sit beside her. "There is a problem at my company. A very serious problem. I have to leave Lagos today. I have to catch a flight this morning. I have to go right now to pack my things and get to the airport." Zainab's heart sank. She had known this was too good to be true. She had known that someone like David, someone so sophisticated and intelligent and kind, could not really stay in her life. He belonged to a different world, a world of business emergencies and important decisions. She belonged to a world of bus stops and restaurant jobs and hospital bills. "I understand," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "You have to go. That is okay. I am sorry you have problems with your business." David sat down beside her and took her hand. "I do not want to go," he said. "I want to stay here and spend more time with you. But I have no choice. There are people depending on me and I have to be there to help them. I'm sorry, Zainab. I am truly sorry." Zainab felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she pushed them down. She had to be strong. She had to accept that this night had been special, but it was over now. People like David did not have time for girls like her. He had a life, a big important life, and she was just someone he had met by chance at a bus stop. "When will you be back?" she asked, even though she was afraid of the answer. David hesitated. "I do not know," he said honestly. "The problem at my company is very big. It might take weeks to fix it. It might take months. I'm not sure." There it was. The truth that Zainab had been expecting. David was leaving, and he would probably never come back. Even if he did come back to Lagos, he would probably forget about her. He would probably meet someone more suitable, someone from his own world, someone who belonged in the kind of life he lived. "We should exchange phone numbers," David said, "so we can stay in touch. I want to call you and hear your voice. I want to know how you are doing. I want to make sure you are okay." Zainab looked at his hopeful face, and her heart broke a little. She wanted to give him her real number. She wanted to stay connected to him. But she was afraid. She was afraid that if she gave him her real number, she would spend every day waiting for his call. She would spend every day hoping that he would come back. And she was afraid that he would forget about her, and she would be even more hurt when he did not call. So she made a decision. A decision that she knew was wrong, but one that she felt she had to make to protect her heart. "Yes, let me give you my number," she said. But when she spoke the numbers, they were not her real numbers. She changed the last 4 digits, making up a number that did not belong to anyone. She watched as David typed the fake number into his phone. "There," he said, looking relieved. "Now we will be able to talk. I will call you as soon as I land. I will call you every day if I can." Zainab nodded, but she said nothing. She felt terrible about lying to him, but she felt like she had no choice. This was the only way to protect herself from the pain that she knew would come. David had to leave very soon. He packed his belongings quickly, throwing clothes and important papers into a large suitcase. As he packed, he kept talking to Zainab, telling her about his company and about the problem that he had to go and fix. He told her that he worked in finance, that he had investments in many different countries, and that he employed thousands of people. As he talked, Zainab realized just how different their worlds really were. She worked at a restaurant making just enough money to survive. He managed millions of dollars and made decisions that affected thousands of people's lives. When David finished packing, he sat down beside Zainab one last time. He took her face in his hands and looked at her very carefully, as if he was trying to memorize what she looked like. "I will come back," he said. "I promise you, Zainab. No matter how long it takes, no matter what happens, I will come back to find you." Zainab wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that what they had shared meant something, that it was not just a one-night connection between two strangers. But she could not let herself believe it. She could not let herself hope. "You should go," she said gently. "You will miss your flight." David called the hotel for a car to take him to the airport. While they waited, they sat together in silence, just holding hands. There was so much that Zainab wanted to say, but she could not find the words. Finally, the car arrived, and it was time for David to leave. He stood up and took his suitcase. He looked at Zainab one more time, and she saw sadness in his eyes. "Goodbye, Zainab," he said. "I will call you." "Goodbye, David," she replied, and she watched as he walked to the door and left. When he was gone, Zainab sat alone in the beautiful hotel suite. She felt empty and sad. She had spent one night with a stranger, a night that had changed something inside her. But now he was gone, and she did not know if she would ever see him again. She called the hotel reception and asked them to call a car to take her home. As she sat in the car, watching the streets of Lagos pass by, Zainab thought about the fake phone number she had given David. She wondered how long he would try to call it before he realized it was wrong. She wondered if he would try to find her, or if he would just forget about her and move on with his life. She did not know that David would search for her for months, desperately trying to find the girl who had stolen his heart at a bus stop on a rainy night. She did not know that he would never forget her, and that one day fate would bring them back together. For now, she just felt sad and alone, carrying the memory of one perfect night that could never be repeated. 6 months had passed since that unforgettable night with David. Zainab's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. After David left Lagos, she had thought about him every single day. She had wondered if he had tried to call the fake number she had given him, and she had felt guilty about lying to him. But she had also felt relieved that he could not find her. She was afraid that seeing him again would hurt too much. During those 6 months, something wonderful had happened. Zainab had made a decision to pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. She had saved every naira she could from her restaurant job, and she had also taken out a small loan from the bank. With her savings and the loan, she had finally enrolled in a nursing school in Lagos. It was not an easy decision. The training was difficult, and she had to work part-time at the restaurant while also studying hard for her classes. But she was determined. She was doing it for herself and she was also doing it for her mother. Her mother had been so proud when Zainab told her about nursing school. Even though she was still sick, her mother had smiled in a way that Zainab had not seen in years. "My daughter is going to be a nurse," her mother had said, touching Zainab's face gently. "You are going to help so many people. I am so proud of you." Those words had given Zainab strength during the difficult months of studying. There were nights when she was so tired that she wanted to give up. There were days when the schoolwork seemed impossible, when the biology and chemistry and anatomy seemed like languages she could never understand. But she thought of her mother's proud smile and she kept going. Now, 6 months later, Zainab was attending a special event at a major hospital in Lagos. The hospital was opening a new wing that had been funded by a famous billionaire philanthropist. Zainab's nursing school had been invited to attend the opening ceremony as part of a special program to encourage young people to pursue careers in healthcare. Zainab had put on her best clothes, a simple but clean blue dress that she had bought especially for the event. She had also borrowed a pair of shoes from her friend at school. The hospital lobby was beautiful and grand. There were flowers everywhere and the air smelled fresh and clean. Important people in expensive clothes walked around, shaking hands and talking about the new equipment and the lives that would be saved. Journalists were there taking photographs. There was music playing softly in the background, and waiters were offering drinks and small food items to the guests. Zainab felt out of place among all these important people. She was just a nursing student from a poor family. She did not belong here with all these rich and powerful people. She decided to move toward the back of the room, away from the crowds, where she could observe the event without drawing attention to herself. As she was walking, a man's voice suddenly called out, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our special guest, the generous philanthropist who has funded this beautiful new wing. Please welcome Mr. David Adeyemi." Zainab's heart stopped. She froze in the middle of the room. She heard his name being announced and her entire body went cold. It could not be him. There were probably many people named David in Lagos. But she knew. Deep down she knew it was him. She turned slowly to look toward the stage where the announcement had come from. And there he was, standing in a perfectly tailored suit, smiling as he walked to the stage. It was David. The same David from that night 6 months ago. But now she understood why he had been so sophisticated, why he had talked about business emergencies and flying to different countries. He was David Adeyemi, a billionaire philanthropist. He was not just a businessman. He was someone very important and very rich. As he stood on the stage, he began to speak about why he had decided to fund the new hospital wing. He talked about the importance of healthcare, about how good medical care could save lives and change families. As he spoke, Zainab realized that everything he had told her that night about his company and his work had been true, but he had not told her the full story. He had not told her that he was one of the richest and most powerful men in Nigeria. Zainab felt embarrassed and ashamed. She thought about that night in his hotel suite, about how she had given him a fake phone number because she thought he was too good for her, too different from her. And now she realized that he was even more out of her reach than she had thought. He was not just a businessman. He was a billionaire. He was someone who could never really be with someone like her. Without thinking, Zainab turned and started walking quickly toward the door. She needed to get away from here. She could not bear to see him, could not bear to be in the same room as him, knowing that he had tried to find her but could not, knowing that he had probably forgotten all about her by now. But as she was hurrying toward the exit, she heard a commotion behind her. Someone was calling out. She heard David's voice saying something to the people around him, and then she heard footsteps running toward her. She walked faster, hoping to reach the door before he could catch up to her. "Zainab." David's voice called out, and it was unmistakable. It was the same voice she had heard all those months ago at the bus stop and in the hotel suite. "Zainab, wait. Please wait." But Zainab did not stop. She could not stop. She reached the door and pushed it open, stepping out into the hallway of the hospital. She was walking so fast that she almost ran into a nurse carrying a tray of medical supplies. "Zainab, please." David called again, and this time she heard him getting closer. His footsteps were getting louder, and she could hear him breathing heavily as he ran after her. Finally, he caught up with her near the elevator. He reached out and gently took her arm, not forcefully, but with a kind touch that made her stop. "Zainab," he said, breathing heavily from running. "It is you. It is really you. I've been looking for you for 6 months. I've been searching everywhere. I could not find you. I did not know your real phone number. I did not know where you lived. I did not know your last name. But I knew I had to find you because that night meant everything to me." Zainab turned around slowly to face him. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. She did not know what to say. She did not know how to explain that she had given him a fake number, that she had run away from him because she was afraid. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I am so sorry, David. I gave you a fake number. I lied to you. I was afraid." David's expression did not show anger. Instead, it showed understanding. He stepped closer to her and he reached up to wipe the tears from her face with his thumbs. "Why were you afraid?" he asked gently. Zainab looked up at him, at this powerful, important man who was now standing in front of her in a hospital hallway. She could see in his eyes that he truly cared about her, that he had not forgotten about her, that he had really been looking for her. "Because I thought you were too good for me," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought that someone like you could never really want to be with someone like me. I thought that if I gave you my real number, you would call and then you would realize that I was not good enough for you. So I lied to protect myself from that pain." David shook his head slowly. "Zainab," he said, "you are wrong. You are more than good enough for me. In fact, you are better than anyone I have ever met. That night at the bus stop and in the hotel you showed me something real. You showed me honesty and strength and kindness. You made me feel like I was a real person, not just a businessman or a billionaire. You saw me for who I really am." Zainab did not know what to say. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but she had never expected it to actually happen. She had never expected to see David again, and she had certainly never expected him to still care about her. "I am in nursing school now," she said softly. "I am pursuing my dream. I am going to be a nurse." David smiled, and it was the same smile she remembered from that night. "I know," he said. "I can see that about you. You are going to be an amazing nurse because you have a good heart." Standing in the hospital hallway, David and Zainab looked at each other for a long moment. The rest of the world seemed to disappear around them. There were people walking past them, nurses and doctors doing their work, but they only saw each other. David took Zainab's hand gently and asked if they could talk privately. They found a quiet room nearby, a small office that was empty. David closed the door behind them and they sat down on 2 chairs facing each other. "I need to tell you something," David said, his voice serious but kind. "When I left Lagos that morning, I was not just leaving because of a business problem. I was leaving because I was running away." Zainab looked at him with confusion. "Running away from what?" she asked. "From my feelings for you," David said honestly. "I had just met you and already you meant more to me than anyone I had ever known. And that scared me. I have spent my whole life working, building my business, making money. I have dated many women but none of them really knew me. None of them cared about me as a person. They cared about my money and my status. But you, Zainab, you were different. You saw me. You really saw me. And I was afraid that if I stayed, if I let myself fall for you, I would lose everything I had worked for." Zainab listened carefully to every word. She thought about that night, about how David had listened to her without judgment, about how he had made her feel like she mattered. Now she understood that he had felt the same way about her. "But I was wrong to leave," David continued. "I realized that as soon as my plane took off. I realized that the business problem was not as important as finding you again. I spent 6 months searching for you. I went to the restaurant where you worked and asked about you. They said you had left your job. I went to the bus stop where I first met you hoping you might come back. I even hired people to help me search for you. I was desperate to find you, Zainab, because I could not stop thinking about you." Zainab felt tears forming in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of happiness, not sadness. She had spent 6 months thinking that David had forgotten about her, that she had been foolish to give him a fake number. But he had been searching for her the whole time. He had been thinking about her just as much as she had been thinking about him. "I gave you a fake number because I was afraid," Zainab admitted. "I was afraid that you would realize I was not good enough for you. I'm just a girl from a poor family. I work at a restaurant. My mother is sick. I do not have much money or education. How could someone like you ever really want to be with someone like me?" David stood up and pulled Zainab to her feet. He held both of her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Listen to me," he said. "In my world, in the world of business and money and power, everyone wants something from me. Everyone is trying to use me or impress me or take advantage of me. But you, Zainab, you did not care about any of that. You did not even know who I was. You just cared about me as a person. You listened to me. You made me laugh. You made me feel alive in a way I had not felt in years. That is why I searched for you. That is why I am standing here now, telling you that I love you." Zainab gasped. David had just said that he loved her. She had dreamed about hearing those words, but she had never really believed it would happen. "I love you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have loved you since that night. Even when I was giving you a fake number, even when I was trying to push you away, I was loving you." David pulled her close and held her. They stood there in that quiet room holding each other, feeling the connection that had started that rainy night at the bus stop. This connection was real. This love was real. Over the next few weeks, David and Zainab spent as much time together as they could. David would pick her up after her nursing classes, and they would go to restaurants and parks and museums. He would listen as she talked about what she was learning in school. He would ask her questions about her dreams and her hopes. He would sit with her while she studied for her exams. And Zainab saw that David was not the important businessman all the time. Sometimes when they were alone, he was just David. He was kind and funny and gentle. He was the man she had met at the bus stop. David also helped Zainab's mother. He paid for her medical bills without asking for anything in return. He visited her in her home and brought her gifts and flowers. Zainab's mother loved David. She would tell Zainab, "This man has a good heart. I can see it in his eyes. You should hold on to him." As the months passed, Zainab continued with her nursing studies. The work was hard, but David was always there to support her. When she felt discouraged, he would remind her of her strength. When she was tired, he would make her rest. When she was worried about her exams, he would study with her. Finally, after 2 years of hard work, Zainab's graduation day arrived. The nursing school was holding a ceremony to celebrate the graduation of all their students. Zainab put on her nursing uniform for the first time, a white dress and a white cap. She looked at herself in the mirror and could hardly believe it. She was going to be a nurse. Her dream was coming true. At the graduation ceremony, there were hundreds of people. There were families and friends celebrating their loved ones. Zainab stood with the other nursing graduates, waiting for her name to be called. When it was finally called, she walked across the stage to receive her certificate and her nursing pin. As she stood there, holding her certificate, she looked out into the audience and found David. He was sitting in the front row and he was smiling at her with pride in his eyes. She saw tears on his face. He was so proud of her. After the ceremony ended, David came rushing toward her. He picked her up and spun her around in his arms. "I am so proud of you," he said over and over again. "You did it, Zainab. You did it. You're a nurse now. You are going to help so many people and change so many lives." That evening, David took Zainab to a beautiful restaurant. After they had eaten dinner, David stood up and took Zainab's hand. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a beautiful ring with a diamond that sparkled in the light. "Zainab," David said, kneeling down on one knee, "I love you more than anything in this world. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner for the rest of my life?" Zainab could not speak. She could only nod yes as tears of joy streamed down her face. David put the ring on her finger and kissed her. Everyone in the restaurant was watching them and cheering. That night, as they sat together looking at the lights of Lagos, Zainab thought about how her life had changed. A year and a half ago she was a tired girl waiting at a bus stop, working 2 jobs just to survive. Now she was a nurse and she was engaged to a man who loved her more than anything. She had found love in the most unexpected way with a stranger at a bus stop. She had learned that real love was not about money or status. Real love was about seeing someone for who they truly are, about listening and understanding and caring. David held her close and kissed the top of her head. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," Zainab replied. And as she looked at the ring on her finger, shining in the light, she knew that her life was just beginning. The best was yet to come.